Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 98. Today on the show, we're joined by Dan Perez of Whitetail Properties to discuss how to buy a hunting property. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today we're talking about the dream of owning your own piece of hunting ground. And joining us is someone who knows all about that dream and how hunters can achieve it. And that's Dan Perez, the CEO of Whitetail Properties. But before we get Dan Perez on the line, Mr. Co-host Dan Johnson, what do you think about us referring to you as Dallas today so we can avoid that name issue?
That's fine. Go for it, because I feel like a Dallas Fort Worth today.
Do people still call you that, or did that kind of fade by the wayside?
It's faded, but there's a handful of people out there that still call me Dallas or DFW or something like that.
All right. Well, we're bringing it back today.
Today, that's fine.
Today. So Dallas, have you ever thought about, dreamed about, or, well, I don't know if you ever went for. Do you want to buy a farm? Do you want to buy a piece of hunting property?
That's a dumb question, Mark.
I figured it was.
Hell yes, I do. I mean, that's everybody's dream, right? To have a some type of property that you can call your own.
How do you feel about that, though? Like when I say those words, buying a hunting property, does that get you just excited? Does that make you hopeful? Does it make you scared? Because like for me, I ask that because like when I start thinking seriously about buying a hunting property someday, I get like all nervous. I'm like, I want it, but then it makes me like scared. Like, can I really do that? Is that smart? I don't know. How do you feel about that?
It's definitely one of those things that you just don't go, you know what? I'm going to go buy 40 acres, or something like that. I mean, or even 10 acres. You don't just do it. It takes, obviously it takes some kind of planning. And then there's also a realization that it's not just, you don't buy land. You got to pay property taxes on it. You have to, there's other things that go into it. I assume, this is just me assuming, maybe Dan can clear some of this up for us, but there's more, it's not like going to a car dealership or really even like buying a house. I mean, you have to prepare for it, I would assume.
Yeah. It definitely seems like, and I have not bought a property of any kind other than just the lot that my house is on. I bought a home. I bought a lot with that home. And that's all I've ever bought, right? Same for you, maybe?
Yep. I mean, I live in a neighborhood, so I live on like a half acre, or if you even want to call it a half acre, but yeah.
Yeah. So you've dreamt about buying a hunting property. Have you ever actually, do you actually think you're going to? Have you seriously considered like this is something that's going to happen in my life at some point or soon?
Yep. There's obviously, for me, and it might be different for you, but for me, there are priorities, a priority change right now. For me, any money that my family gets is, we're in a mode where we're trying to get rid of as much debt as possible. So instead of having to make more money, we can get closer to that, into the positive, I guess you would say, by paying off as much debt as we can now and loosening up some more, possibilities for spending on maybe a piece of property, or, I don't know, whatever me and the wife decide on what we want to do with that extra income. But that's just what it is. It would be extra income. It's not a priority. You know what I mean?
Right. So realistically, do you think in 10 years you will be in a position to own a piece of property?
I would like to say yes. I would like to say potentially sooner than that, but I think I have to realize what my expectations are. Everybody wants to say, dude, I want 100 acres of primo ground. Well, I don't think you can start off like that. I think what has to happen is you have to work your way into the land game, and that would be start off with something small, and then you can snowball that by A, buying property around the current property that you have, or C, or B,
You were never too good with the alphabet, were you?
No, dude, I can't even count to 10.
Well, that's your fingers. That's not your own fault.
But anyway, you know what I mean? Or sell that piece and go into your next piece, which may be bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that a lot. The idea of flipping your way up to a dream property or whatever it is that you want someday, working your way up to it.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've bounced around with this a lot in my head too. Like I've at times I'm like really serious. Like, yes, I absolutely am gonna buy a farm. I want to start preparing for it. Or I've even like been looking at places. Like, is there some way I could go in with a buddy and buy a place now? And it's a little bit different for me because I can try to justify it in my head as a business investment, I guess, or at least I can tell my wife that.
Right.
So I've tried to convince myself in that way, but then I always kind of fall back on no, it's just you're not in the position to do that right now. Someday. But it's a huge commitment. I mean, that's one of the things is like it's just a huge commitment. If you buy a piece of property, not only are you committing financially. You're not only committing financially, but you're also committing, location-wise and with your time and your energy and all that stuff. So it's like a big, big decision, and I've been all over the board with it. Like last summer, I remember like I was on a tear, like online, looking at farms, talking to my buddy, talking to a realtor, and then I did that for a week, and I was like, okay, you're just like high on excitement right now, take a step back. And now I'm kind of back to the spot where, someday, but probably not right now or anytime soon. But it sure is a lot of fun to dream about. I got to be honest. I don't know if you do this, but I go online to different like hunting realtor websites like Whitetail Properties website and others. And I just go and look at the properties and dream about them, look at the pictures, and I pick which one I want. Do you do that?
Once a week at least.
Okay.
Dude, I go to Whitetail Properties. We're talking about Whitetail Properties today, but I go on their website at least once a week and just look at, basically dream window shop for properties. It's like, oh, here's a pretty affordable 2,200 acres in Kansas. Yeah. I can see how I could maybe get that someday. Oh no! Oh, here's another 420 acres in southeastern Iowa that has my name all over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, here's the game, Dan, or Dallas. Sorry. Here's what we're gonna do.
Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas. Let's say I gave you $500,000. I'm gonna gift you $500,000 right now. Let's say somehow I won the lottery. Mm-hmm. I have that cash. I've given it to you to purchase a hunting property of some type somewhere with anything you want on it. How are you going to use that $500,000 right now?
Man,
give me your dream property within that $500,000 price range. Tell me all about it.
How much time do we have?
We have 6 minutes, Dallas.
My dream piece of property. Don't get me wrong. I would love to own like a mountainside where I have the opportunity for elk and mule deer and maybe even whitetails on it.
Yeah.
But if I was, because I'm in Iowa, I'll talk about the perfect $500,000 is probably going to get you somewhere around, I want to say, let's see, $500,000. You're looking at somewhere around 200 acres, maybe less. 150 to 200 acres, just depending on what you can get the property for and what's around it. But I feel you can get more property if you're in some kind of a river bottom or floodplain area. So what I would want almost a perfect square. I want one of the borders of the property to be a river, So it's hard to access through, for one side. I want another piece of the property to be a road. So you have two really clear cut borders, and the other one would be, obviously fence lines that would encompass that. But I would want it real thick, real nasty, real steep. And because I'm not afraid to put in hard work, I would want it to the point where it is so nasty and thick, it would be almost unhuntable. But, I want some places where you could plant a food plot or have a farmer come in and farm for you, or like I would say 40, maybe 30 or 40% tillable, and then 60 to 70% timber, and like mixture of young and old timber.
And where in Iowa?
Oh, probably where I live, close to where I live.
Really? So you'd want it right there. You wouldn't want to go down to the far south, huh?
Well, I mean, my county, the county that I do most of my hunting in, is only one county away from the Missouri border. So I would consider that south.
Right. I thought you were talking about where you currently live, where your house is.
Yeah, where I currently hunt. Yeah, I mean, there's some good property around here too. It's just I would want to get away from a bigger population, so I would probably head back to my hometown.
Yeah, that's a good spot.
Yeah,
very good.
It just depends, like from what I hear, like prices, and we can talk to Dan about this, but land prices are on their way down, I think.
You think so?
I think so.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, maybe tillable ground, because I think value of the commodities like soybeans and corn are going down.
Yeah. That definitely does have a huge influence on pricing. That's for sure. Well, Dan will definitely be able to give us some more details on that, and definitely want to ask him about that. I think our dreams are pretty similar.
Yeah.
My property would be something pretty similar like that. I like the idea of about 30% open tillable, about the rest cover, but I'd like a mixture of, I want some timber, but I want a lot of CRP and like early successional growth. I love me some grass, some switchgrass, some warm season grasses, some stuff like that, some cedars. Like you said, I would love a lot of topography, hilly, rugged terrain, maybe a couple creek bottoms going through it.
Yep.
I love the idea of a river on one side because it gives you a cool way of accessing that property too. Canoeing or something and pop into one of those other parts of the property without having to walk through. So that's super cool. So yeah.
When is that check coming?
Yeah, so probably never, but if it changes, I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. I mean, I don't want to get my hopes up, but if you're thinking it's a possibility, then I'll just wait. I'll quit my job tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd say hold off on that a little bit. Keep on hoping, but wait just a touch, because I don't want your wife to murder me.
Yeah,
and I'm concerned that would be a serious possibility if this all went down.
Yeah, murder's not good.
No,
never has been.
That's one of the great truths of anything, I suppose. So on that note, do you think we should we get the real expert on here to educate both of us?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's take a quick moment to thank our partners at Sitka Gear, and then we will give Dan a call. So, as you know, every week for the last year or so on this segment, we've been joined by Sitka product category leader Dennis Zuck to answer various questions about hunting clothing and Sitka Gear itself, and that's been awesome. But soon, we're going to be starting something new. Over the course of the coming months, rather than talking about products or gear, we want to start sharing stories. Stories specifically related to folks who have had incredible or insightful or interesting experiences while out in the woods using Sitka gear. So with that said, we've got a whole host of interesting folks lined up, but we also want to hear from you. So if you've used Sitka gear in the woods and think you've got an interesting story worth sharing, shoot us an email by way of our contact page on wiredtohunt.com, and we might just feature you in this segment on a future podcast episode. I can't wait to hear from you. And with that said, now let's get Dan Perez on the line. All right, with us now on the line is Dan Perez. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we enjoyed chatting with you. I guess it was maybe February or March of 2015 about shed hunting. So I'm excited now to pick your brain about what probably your greatest expertise is, which is all things related to land. So we were just talking a minute ago, me and Dallas were just about how much we dream about doing this, about someday buying a property. So I think we're just kind of excited to pick your brain about this topic that we have thought about so much. But I'm rambling because I'm so excited to talk about a property. So
That's cool. Well, I'm always happy to share, especially about land ownership, because it's my passion as well. You know, I've personally bought and sold properties through the years, and I can tell you there's nothing that is as exciting as buying a piece of property. You know, during the period that I'm thinking about buying a piece of property, through the process of buying the property, and then closing on the property, and then planning how I'm going to convert that property to a mega big buck property, there's nothing that I think about more. I know sharing that with you publicly would probably make my wife mad because I should be thinking about her all the time. But it is something I'm very passionate about. I can't imagine anything that makes me more excited than purchasing a piece of ground and then making that piece of ground a buck paradise.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that because that's going to set us up for a great conversation here. Now, really quick before we dive into that, you know, when we chatted with you back a year ago, we heard a little bit about what you do at Whitetail Properties. But just in case there's anyone listening today that hasn't heard that, can you give us a really brief primer on what Whitetail Properties is and what you do with them?
Sure. Whitetail Properties, we specialize in land. Our niche is our strongest niche is recreational properties, and even more specifically whitetail properties. But we are all equally experts in farm, agricultural properties, as well as mineral properties, waterfowl properties, and timber properties. We're an all properties to all people type of a company. That's what we do. Okay. And my position is I'm the I've got three titles actually. I'm the CEO of Whitetail Properties and the COO of Whitetail Properties, as well as the chief broker here. And we've got I think right now we've got roughly 160 agents spread across 21 different states. So we stay very, very busy.
Wow. It seems like every time I hear about the company, it just seems like you guys are growing like gangbusters.
Yeah. You know what's so cool about our business is that, I'll tell you what the criteria is for our agents, just to give you some idea. We have a lot of agents, but we don't hire everybody by any stretch of the imagination. You know, there's a lot of companies that if you have a heartbeat and the ability to get a real estate license, they automatically hire you. But we do have three things that are very, very important to us as far as the foundation of our consideration when hiring. And one is that that person is an honorable person. That's first and foremost, is that they're an honorable person. Number two is that they are able to interact with potential buyers and sellers professionally without ever speaking down to anyone or without feeling intimidated by anyone that they felt was above them. You know, like in this business, it's really cool is that we get to do business with some multi-billionaires, you know, and on the other scale, we get to introduce people to their first piece of property. You know, it's all kinds, but what is so neat about it is because all of us have the same common passion. And I've got billionaires, people, very wealthy people, that they call me and they say, "Hey Dan, I just shot this giant buck, man. It was cool as all." I mean, they're talking to me just like the guys I've grown up with, you know, and because when it comes to hunting, we're all the same. We're all predators at the end of the day. So it's pretty cool. It's a business that you could learn to love because there's so many other businesses that the products are very beneficial to the end user, but you certainly for example, my one of the businesses that I had early on in my life was appliance and electronics. We owned appliance electronics stores down in Florida. And although it was a lucrative business and it benefited a lot of people, I mean, people have to have appliances, they have to have electronics. It's not something you go home and talk to your buddies about. Man, you're not going to believe this new refrigerator. You know what I mean? It's not. but when the product that you're involved with, two things, is made by God. I mean, it's not something that's manufactured overseas and warehoused in China. You know, it's made, and he's not making anymore. And you're privileged to be able to sell it, and you're passionate about it. And the people that you're selling it to, that are buying it, are also passionate. It's not like they're buying it because they have to have it for the house or for the family. You know, it's a very, very cool business.
Yeah, everybody's excited to be a part of the process, it seems like.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, Dan, if you don't mind me asking, when did you buy your first piece of hunting property?
I think the first, well, you know, it's funny that you asked that. My first tract that I bought was back in Florida, and I was, I believe, I'm pretty sure I was like 21, but it was 21. I was 21 years old, and it wasn't a big tract. It was 5 acres. That was my first tract, and it seemed like, man, that was giant. I mean, you know, 5 acres, and I'm looking through 5 acres of oaks and pines, and it was again. I'd go home at night, and I'd lay in bed thinking about those 5 acres, and then there was an opportunity to buy land where the landowner had taken a big section of land in an area in Florida called Steenahatchee. It's along the Gulf, and it just was really good hog, turkey, and deer hunting. And he divided it up into smaller tracts, and he offered them in a land contract, which is a contract for deed. In other words, you don't borrow the money from the bank. You actually pay him a down payment and make him payments, and he holds the deed. And when it's paid in full, you get the deed, but you own it, and you're not renting it. So as it appreciates in value, you are actually enjoying the appreciation in value. And you have tax benefits as well. So I was able to buy some. My wife and we bought some property on the Steenahatchee River, which was awesome piece of property. It wasn't very big. It was only about, I think we owned about 20 acres on the Steenahatchee River, and that was enormous. And again, it was the focus of our weekends, and it was, you know, what's cool about it, it's no different now. I just don't have as much time now, but just to go on the property and work. You know what I mean? Go over there and fire up the chainsaw and clear some visibility to the river, and hang a stand and put in food plot. All that stuff, all that work was so much fun. It was just so especially when your job isn't in the outdoors. When your job's not in the outdoors, and you get to get out there and sweat doing something that you're passionate about, and while you're doing all that stuff, what's cool about land is that you're also forcing inflation. You're also appreciating the value of that property while you improve it. And the reason I mention that is because there's not a solider investment than land. And I'm not saying that because I'm in the land business. If you take a 10-year prospectus on land over any 10-year period, whatever the lowest peak is, whatever the highest peak was, if there's ever a dip in the value of property, it always comes back considerably higher within a short period within those 10 years. It's not near as volatile as paper investments. For example, if you invest in stocks or mutual funds, if the economy takes a dip, there's nothing that you can do about it. By the same token, if you want that stock to go up in value, there's nothing you can do about it. You could cross your fingers till they're white, and you could pray about it, but you cannot affect the value. Where a piece of of property, a tract of land, depending on what it's used for. We'll say for hunting, because you guys are hunters, I'm a hunter, and that's the part of the land that I'm the most passionate about. However, I'll talk about it a little bit in a few moments about the opportunity to increase, not to increase, but to have a steady income from your land. But you could take a piece of land that maybe has something as simple as, and I've seen some properties that have been several $1 million and have a piece of barbed wire, a stretch of barbed wire for a gate. You know what I mean? Just small things like putting in a real gate, fixing a road that goes in, putting a couple food plots here and there strategically. Just little things change the appearance and the value of a property instantly. That ambiance or that first impression when you walk onto a piece of property, it's amazing how that changes the value and the feeling in somebody's mind. And then consider if you were in a position to spend a little more money, like putting a new fence on the face, at least the face that meets the road, or putting in a small body of water. It's not as expensive as some people think. And making a few changes instantly, your property becomes more valuable and much more desirable instantly.
So, sorry, go ahead, Dallas.
What are some of the things that can change as far as not necessarily what you can do to a piece of property, but maybe some other extrinsic things that can change or make the price of land go up or down?
Well, it's a lot of it relates to that you have no control over. It would be things like the economy, of course. Here's a kind of a flip in the way people look at. Sometimes when the interest rates go up, you might think, well, that's going to slow down purchasing of property. But at the end of the day, it's the bottom line. And dollars are dollars, whether they come from interest rate or they come from the asking price of a property. It's still, when you put a calculator to it, you're trying to determine if you could afford it or not. And so when interest rates go up, for example, not immediately, but after 90 days or so that the higher rate's been up there, you'll see the price of properties come down a little bit, which stimulates more sales than it hurts when the interest rates go down. I guess what I'm saying, it's the price of the property is much more attractive than a higher interest rate is distractive. And so that's a kind of a cause and effect type relationship. And so the economy is a main factor that will affect, just like it affects any investment for that matter. But as I referred to before, within a 10-year period, like you normally weigh a prospectus, weigh an investment through a prospectus, land is always going up. It may slip back for a small period of time because we just had a hiccup in interest rates, but then it's back going up again. An example is this. The cost of fuel is down right now. That's great. It's coming up a little bit. But I remember when fuel got up to $4 and people said, man, I can't afford to go on vacation. I can't afford this. I can't do that. I can't do this. And after we had that $4 out there for a little while, everybody went back to what they do. They just figured out how to make it all work. They still went on vacations. They still bought what they wanted to buy. They still did whatever they wanted to do. So there's little hiccups that might slow land down for a little while, but it always comes back stronger. And I'll tell you this, there's never a bad market. Things cycle. Just not with land, it doesn't cycle as volatilely as with other investments, gold, paper, silver, those things. So there's always a market. Either it's a buyer's market or there's a seller's market. And when it's a buyer's market, the price of land, for example, is lower, and but the business is still very strong because the people that are in a position to buy, in other words, the economy doesn't affect them as much. They've got money put away. They're gobbling up as much property as they can because they're buying equity. Does that make sense to you? They're buying the equity because that land's going to be worth much more in a very short time.
Yep.
And so, but when it's a seller's market, the sellers are going crazy selling properties, but it's not always the best time to buy a property from the buying standpoint. But I'll say this: I've paid more than a property has been worth before. An example is I bought it was 110 acres, and I loved it. It was here in Pike County. It was on Dutch Creek, but I wanted the neighbor's property really, really, really bad, and then it came up for sale, and I literally paid $1,000 an acre, if you can imagine, more than it was worth. Now it added even more value to my property because it put me on the other side where I was touching a road on either side of my property, gave me more access, and made my property more desirable. But within 2 years, not only did I make up that $1,000, but I picked up another $1,000 per acre in value. So even when you pay more for land, depending on your time, how much time you have, it'll become a good investment. I mean, in other words, it'll go up. I don't know. I guess there's situations and places where land does not go up as quickly. We're in 21 states. I don't know of any. So it's just a lot of times it's a matter of time to recoup. But there's a lot of cases where you can buy equity simply by knowing that, number one, and I'll give you an example. Let me go back to where I'm going with this. The same analogy, if you're a home investor, you're the guy that buys homes and sells them. What you usually look for is a good area, a nice community, and try to buy the house that's the most run down, that you could buy for the lowest price in a high-end subdivision or a high-end area. And then you improve that property, and because you're buying it already with equity because of where it is. Once you put the improvements and you bring it up to the value of the neighborhood, and your improvements don't cost as much as what it would have cost you to purchase one of the houses that was already there that was nice, then you've made some money. You've got equity, and you're in a great neighborhood. Well, when it comes to properties that have to do with hunting, there's some areas that you could have everything. You could have the best food plots. You could have the best water, most accessible water. You could have the best cover. You could have everything, but you don't have any deer because it's not in the right neighborhood. You know what I mean? But by the same token, you could buy a tract of land that has been cattled for years, grazed for years. The cattle have destroyed all the underbrush in the timber, and the ponds look like mud holes from the cattle going in and out of them, and it's just the least desirable tract of land in a really good neighborhood. What I mean by a good neighborhood, an area that has a history of producing big bucks over the years, So you could say you go in there and you buy that property well below market value because it is not, when you do a CMA, a market analysis, and you compare it to the other properties, it's not worth as much because it doesn't have this and that and the other things. But when you improve that property, when you perhaps take an area that's cool season fescue that the cows have run all over for years, and let's say you take that fescue and you chemically burn it, and then you burn it, and the successional plants start to come up, those forbs that provide really good nourishment to the deer. And the warm season grasses that have been sitting under the cool season grasses dormant for years, they start coming up, and now you're improving the habitat. And then you go and you perhaps put in, you study that property, the aerials, and you put the food plots where they make the most sense wind-wise. And perhaps you put in not anything fancy, but a road network that allows you to get in and out of those food plots with the least amount of intrusion. And you just lay it out like the perfect hunting track. And heck, within two short seasons, you've got all the big bucks that all your neighbors do, you know. And now, and here's what's neat. Now you start your own prospectus, and you do it through two ways. You do it with the use of trail cameras to document the quality of the animals that are on that property, and through the animals that you've harvested. You put together a nice portfolio of pictures and trail camera pictures and success photos. Because what is so cool about this, and it's exciting, I'm passionate about it, is that at one time the value of property was primarily based on the maturity of the timber, the value of the timber, and or the fertility of the soil. And now the value of properties in a lot of areas is based on the quality of the animals that inhabit that tract of land. And that's what's cool, because it's given birth to a new kind of farmer. There were farmers there's farmers that plant corn and beans and tobacco and cotton and everything else out there. There's a farmer. And now there are deer farmers. And I don't mean deer farmers behind high fences. I mean deer farmers that are growing free-ranging deer that are enormous and adding value to their property while they do it. That what could be more fun than that, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's the dream. That is the dream.
I know.
Now,
I know, and you know, like everybody else, I love harvesting big deer. Who doesn't? But I take I have more enjoyment in developing a piece of property and then just seeing the big deer that weren't there when I bought that property. That's even more exciting to me. And the only reason I talk about selling, you know, a lot of times when guys, they come to us and they say, hey, listen, I'm looking for that dream property, and this is what I got to have, this is what I want to have, this is what, you know, they tell us everything, and of course then we lay it all out, look for the right piece of property for them, and and find it for them. Now, realistically, that's not going to be your last property. That's not going to be your last dream property. So the good news is don't try to buy your dream property. Take the tract of land that you could afford in the right location, the right neighborhood. Develop that tract of land. Then use the equity from that tract of land to buy your next dream property. So, and that's why I always talk about increasing the value of it through. In this particular case, through growing the deer on that property. Deer, I relate to deer. There's a lot of different types of habitat. Waterfowl is another one that has a lot of effect on what the value of a property is. And waterfowl properties, that's even another dimension as far as building an infrastructure to support waterfowl. But the whitetail part of it is not that expensive. It's not like you got to pump thousands of gallons of water and move it and have pipes under the ground for miles and all that kind of stuff. It's not as intense, but man, it adds so much value when you have. And I've sold some farms that have been really tricked out. I mean, really really nice farms where I've driven around with a photo album with 200-inch animals in, and that's all we talk about. They don't even want to know. They don't want to know about anything other than what's sitting on that property right now. and what is the history of that property. It's kind of exciting when you can talk in those terms rather than just the yields on the crops and what the timber will bring.
Yeah.
It all ties in. It all ties in.
So here's my
and
question.
If I start, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was going to say, so you bring up a good point there, right? People start seeing these pictures and they start hearing about the history of deer on a property. And like, I think any of us listening, if we don't already own property, the idea of it sounds amazing. Like if I saw this property, you were showing me these pictures and I saw this 200 buck, yeah, I would love to have it. But how does someone go about figuring out if buying a property is actually the right decision for them, whether it be financially or otherwise? What would you tell someone? What should they be thinking through? What's the process of how to think through this financially and otherwise when trying to decide, is owning a piece of property, is buying a hunting property right for me?
Right. And I'll tell you this, different areas, and I don't know where this particular your station covers, what area, but I'll tell you all of the Midwest, and not only the Midwest, because there's a lot of income producing properties in the South as well, and in the North. So here's what I do, and this is me. I'm a deer hunter. I'm passionate about deer hunting. I'm passionate about land, but I'm also passionate about security, and I'm also passionate about investments. And so this is my rule of thumb when I'm considering a piece of ground. And what's good about it is that some of the best whitetail properties have a lot of edge, and some of the best whitetail properties they're a combination of agriculture of some nature and timber or brush. They're very seldom just timber. You know what I mean? And even if they're just timber, there's ways to generate income from timber. But I'm going to talk with you right now about a good mix to consider when looking at a tract of land, whether it's 20 acres, 40 acres, 500 acres, thousands of acres, it doesn't matter. I look for a mix to somewhere around a 50-50 timber to tillable, or 60-40 timber to tillable, somewhere in that range. I'm very interested in good soil. The reason that soil is important, not only for the yields, not only for the crops, but also good soil grows big deer as well. And so I'll give you a case in point. One example is I bought a tract of land in Missouri. And for what I could cash rent that property for, it's about 60. In this particular case, it was about 70% tillable. It's got creeks. You know how the timber follows the water. A lot of times, it's got creeks running through it, and it's got timber that follows the water. And I've got some really, really good tillable out there. And I've got a lot of edge, and and so that tract of land is giving me a 6% return. So if you listen to these numbers for a minute, it'll make a lot of sense to you. A 6% return is what I'm getting on the entire investment, which is not even what I'm investing. And the reason I say not even what I'm investing is when your return or your cash rent, in this case, your return is cash rent, is greater than what that money's costing you. So I borrow that money. When I borrowed that money at the bank, I paid, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was 4.20 is what I borrowed the money for, 4.20, and I'm getting a 6% return. So with interest and principal, my farm is making my mortgage payment. I'm not paying anything out of pocket to make my mortgage payment. So think about that for a second. So when that happens, when that payment, your return is greater than your payment, and even if your return was not greater than your payment, whatever it is, it's a whole lot less than what you'd be paying for that farm if you had no income on it at all. You know what I mean? So your 6%. So you're making the difference. You're basically making the difference between 6% and 4.20. Now, where the real return is, since you're not coming out of pocket anymore for taxes or anything, is your down payment. So if you take your down payment and you figure the return on your down payment, it's something like 60%, not 6%. You know what it's enormous, and you can't do that. I mean, you can't get a return like that on anything. That's leverage. That's compounding interest, compounding your investment rather. So if you take to take it a step further, the years that you own that property, you could count on when you look at most prospectuses, and you want to know what can I count on as far as return on this property. As a rule of thumb, an average is between 4 and 6% return a year. So if the property goes up 6% this year, you add that 6% to the property. Then now, when you figure 6% next year, you add that 6% to the 6% that you added last year. So it keeps compounding, if you follow me, with the appreciation. Mm-hmm. So here you are, you got this piece of property. In 5 years, you've got a ton of equity, and it's cost you. It's really cost you nothing because your down payment is it actually came off the total principal of your property, so it's sitting there. It's still yours, and you sell it. And you've got all that equity, and you've got all that appreciation, and you didn't have to make a payment at all in this particular scenario. And when you look at the investment like that, and here's my point: if say you're at a point where you want to invest in stock because over a period of time it's had a good track record, and you want to make that money. So, but you can't take and put 20% down and finance stock. If you want $500,000 worth of stock, you've got to come out of pocket with $500,000. You know, you can't come out of pocket with 20% of it, and because there's a reason why you can't. The banks won't loan you money on stocks or mutual funds or any of that because they're very volatile. But they're very happy to loan you money on land. It's tangible. You could touch it. You could feel it. It's there, and on top of all that, you know, I always say the investment-wise, and, you know, I rattle off a lot of stuff to and a lot of people may hear it and they may not follow it. They may not be tracking with me because it's a lot to take in at one time. But there's not, in my mind, there's not a better investment. I always thought that, and I've been doing this my whole life, my whole adult life, is trying to have a balanced portfolio where I have money in land, I have some money in mutual funds, I have some money in stocks. I've never put money in gold or silver or anything like that. But this last dip that we had here about a month ago, we had the Dow took a dip that was like bam, it was huge, and I pulled up on the computer and looked at what I had there, and I lost a ton of money in one day. It just makes you sick, you know. That is too much volatility, and so what I'm doing right now is as soon as that stock it comes up even anywhere close to where it was before, if it comes up within 10% of what it was before I took that big dip, I'm taking it out of there. Now what I risk is now I've got to pay on those particular stocks. I'm going to have to pay income tax on it. I'm going to have to pay them a penalty, not a penalty, but I have to pay them a fee for taking it out and everything. But it's worth it to me. I'm going to take it out, take my lump one last time rather than take it every time the market swings, and invest it in land. So I'm going to take anything I have and I'm investing in land. I'm not going through those peaks and valleys anymore. Yeah. I want something that two things. I want something that is steadily going up, and something that I can control. I can actually control the value of it by improvements.
So for the average guy, like you mentioned there, like there's a lot of things we're covering here. I want to take it back to the average guy. So correct me if I'm making sense of this, but for the average guy or girl out there who wants to get started with their first property, I think the main points I'm taking away are, number one, think about the fact that you can start small and then increase your value on that property, resell it maybe to eventually get what you're dreaming of down the road. But to make that investment kind of neutral, from the get-go, you want to, number one, look at a property that has, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you said around 50% of tillable land, so you can have cash rent on that, and then maybe some money you can make on a timber basis. And then number two, hold on to that property long enough to make back your down payment in that inflation of the value. If you do those two things, am I correct in that that's going to make this a pretty solid investment? If you get a property you can make money off of from cash rent and give it enough time to appreciate in value, the average guy can probably afford to get a starter property?
Absolutely. And two, the thing to consider, as soon as you make those improvements, as soon as you do, you've just forced appreciation. I mean, immediately. And that's pretty neat, because there was a while there I can't do that stuff now that we have our own brokerage, because when I have a good deal, I am going to find I have people that are looking for good deals, and I'm talking about properties that you could buy with equity. In other words, you don't even have to wait. You could buy properties today. A very good friend of mine makes a ton of money, and what he does is he purchases properties. He has a good eye, and he has experience, and he makes some improvements. Then he lists them with us. He lists them with us because we reach the greatest number of people for those type of properties across the country. We do, and I tell you what's funny is he picks those properties up kind of before. In other words, they're out there, but they're marketing them. Not for what they're worth. You know, they're talking about the cattle grazing when it's potentially a world-class deer farm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so he looks for those farms. He improves them, and he doesn't hold them for 6 months, and he makes a lot of money. So it's not a matter all the time of I gave an example before that if you buy a property that is the least desirable property in an extremely desirable area, hunting-wise, and then you improve that property to the level of the other ones in that area, the length of time it takes you to improve that property, you could immediately turn around and make a bunch of money. Now, if you hung on to it for a couple seasons and 2 or 3 seasons, and then had a really good prospectus of pictures and testimonies of animals that are on the property and have been harvested on that property, now you stand to make even more money, you know?
Gotcha.
You're tracking. I mean, we're tracking together on this.
Yeah.
There's several ways to approach it. You could turn immediately. There's value in turns too. You could take one property, and I'm just going to say numbers here. Say you take a property and you flipped it, and you made $50,000, and you've done that in 6 months. Or you took that same property and improved it a little bit more, built up a portfolio of big bucks and so on over a 3-year period, and you turned it and you made $250,000. I mean, made or earned above what you spent. Then if you're in that position, it would have been worth you hanging on to it. It all depends. Everybody's approach is different.
Yeah. So when we're just, let's say, okay, now I decide, okay, I think I can probably do this. I think it sounds like a sound investment. I've got a little money saved up for a down payment. What are your thoughts on the two different methods for buying a farm, whether it be financing it through a bank or, as you mentioned a little bit ago, a land contract? What's the benefit to either, and which one would you recommend for the average guy or girl?
Well, I'd say there's many more properties that you can buy through a conventional method of finance. Once in a while, there'll be people out there that either, like I mentioned earlier, that take a big piece of property, divide it, and they're able individually to make more money, and they're making interest on top of it. And where that's a nice opportunity for people is the down payment is much less. Those people are not interested in your down payment. They're interested in what they're making on the interest on that property over the years, you know. And so that's a good way. But there's when I have purchased besides that one on land contracts, usually it's kind of like I ask the seller, what is your ultimate goal? You know, a lot of times an older person maybe that's selling a property, he just wants steady income. He doesn't necessarily want that big capital gain at one time. It's easier to defer it over a period of time where he doesn't get hit as hard tax-wise, and he earns a little interest, and they like that, and it makes it easier for somebody just starting out that maybe doesn't have as much to put down. You could use a rule of thumb of basically between 20 and 30% down, depending on the lender at the banks, conventional lending, and so there's some lenders that they are primarily loan money for land, such as First Farm Credit or Farm Credit. They're very similar. Farm Credit and First Farm Credit, and then there's Ag America is a big lender, lends in every state. You could Google Ag America, and they're big, and their thing is agriculture, recreational land. There's several out there. Sometimes your local lenders. Here's one thing to consider too. Is if you live in Florida, for example, and you want to buy a tract of land in Illinois, your Florida banker would not loan you money most of the time to buy a tract of land in Illinois. Most often what will happen is the lender that you'll use will actually be in the county in Illinois that you want to purchase that property more often than not. Now, in the case of lenders that are national, like Ag America, they're in 50 states. So as long as they're there, they're happy to. As long as they're licensed there and doing business there, they're happy to loan you money. And the reason I mention that is if say you're from Florida, you're from New Jersey, or wherever you are, and you want to buy a property in Kansas or Iowa or somewhere else, it's more likely that your local banker will try to talk you out of that purchase because he wants to keep your business local, you know, and it's just good to know that going in. But the bank financing or like First Farm Credit or Farm Credit, those are much more obtainable, much more prolific in the marketplace than a land contract or a contract for deed.
Okay.
But that doesn't exclude them. They're out there. You just have to ask, you know?
Right. They're hard to come by, but it sounds like if you do find it, it's not a bad situation for some people. And I'm curious, Dallas over there, what are you thinking about this? I know we've kind of talked a little bit about the finances of things here. Do you have any more questions on that side of things?
Not necessarily from a finance standpoint, but maybe as far as, everybody thinks that you need to, I need to make more money in order to buy land. Is there some preparation, maybe like paying off some debt that you currently have, or any other tips or tricks that can actually help prepare you for the jump into purchasing a property?
Yeah, that's a good. I like that you said that. It's always good to pay down debt, but here's the thing: is especially, a lot of times a young couple says, "Man, I can't afford that," and it's like 20%. That'll take me forever to, of course, two things. One, keep that first one within where 20% is obtainable. It's realistic within what your earnings are. But more, if you want to have things in your life, this is just me talking out loud. If you want to have things in your life, don't expect to have everything early in your life. Instead of that new big truck, that's an expensive truck. Be more modest in that truck and put money away to put into land. Instead of putting in a pool this year, or maybe buying a bigger house this year, or maybe, there's so many things that our culture, the American culture, is as soon as you think you could afford it, buy it, because, you know what I mean? And but if you do that, if you put it in land, and that land's going up in equity, your automobile is not going up in nothing. That swimming pool really doesn't add to the value of your house very much. There's a lot of things that we spend money on that doesn't put us in a position later on to have more money. But land is one of those things that you could purchase when you're young into your life, into your in growing a family and such. Then, or later on, whenever it's an investment that will pay back, and it makes so much more sense to have a piece of land that is growing in value, and you're enjoying it meanwhile. And that was the other thing I was going to mention. I'm talking about paper investments, and they're good, and a lot of people have made a lot of money off of paper investments, and a lot of people have lost a lot of money on paper investments. But I don't know anyone that has ever been able to kill a big buck on a paper investment, or enjoy it in any way. But land is something that you can build a lot of memories and a lot of enjoyment for your family. It's something that you could leave behind for your family or be your retirement. Right now is what I'm looking at. Here in a few years, I'll probably retire, and I have enough. This is pretty awesome. Is that I'll have enough in just the cash rent that I get from my tenant farmers to carry me in my retirement years. That's like as solid an investment as you can have. The only thing that can spoil that, and I hope that that never happens, is that our government turns around and says, "Hey, we're gonna buy corn and beans from Africa, or we're gonna start buying from China where they're growing it under a roof or something." I hope that never happens. But as it is now, here's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, that they don't keep up with, like erosion. Through wind and rain and farming, sometimes aggressive farming, we literally lose thousands of acres a year of land. It actually washes down the rivers. We lose it. It's gone, of agricultural land. In fact, in the millions of acres that we lose. So, and at the same time, we're actually popping out more babies. And we don't have any more space than what we had several hundred years ago. We have less space to live on and more people living on it. You go to the big cities, for example, St. Louis over here, I could relate to. I remember when I moved here, St. Louis was way more contained. Now the suburbs stretch way out into the country. All these cities, the suburbs now are out into the city where farmers used to plant corn and beans. So the population is stretching out into the country, and the country is shrinking up. So my point is, land is not going to become any less expensive. It's going to continue to go up in value because there's less of it every day. Every day there's less land and there's more people. So I don't know. I mean, like a solid investment that you could bank on, I don't know a better one. I honestly don't. I mean, something that, and then you add to that you can control it to some degree. You can control the value of it. It's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome deal.
So let's say I've now decided, I want to do this. I've got the money. I've prepared myself for it. The first step in this process, I imagine, is starting to find a property you actually want to actually want to purchase. What's your advice for someone who's in that first step, trying to find the right property? I'm sure your website, Whitetail Properties, is a great resource. But in addition to that, what else can someone do to start finding their property that they're going to get started with?
Yes. Well, it depends on how broad a range you have. What if you're limited to just a particular area close to home, or if you're looking at a certain county, all that's important. But let's say for a moment that maybe it's like a 3-county area. That's a lot of times people are a little flexible in that regard. We talk to people from all over the country, but do your research on, depending on what you're after. I mean, I'm talking in terms of deer, because you guys are deer guys.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If you were talking to me as far as agriculture, it'd be different. If you're talking to me as far as cattle, it'd be different. But I think a lot of your listeners are hunters, and so saying that it's hunting property, and saying let's say that what you're after is an area that has produced big bucks. Well, then at that point, I try to gather all the information I can, and Google is awesome for bucks that have been taken in X county. And just Google it, and get in your Pope and Young book, get in your Boone and Crockett book. You know, it's funny because when I moved here years ago, I moved here. I don't know if you know this, but I was with PSC Precision Shooting Equipment for 18 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they moved me up from Florida to the Midwest, and I had quite an area that I could live in, and the first thing I did was flip over the Pope and Young book and narrow down the counties that have produced the biggest bucks. You know, then I cross-checked it with Boone and Crockett, and that's how that was part of how I narrowed down where I even lived. So those are resources you could go to just to kind of narrow down. But if you know already where you want to be, the area you want to be, then I would contact a land specialist, not just a real estate agent that sells houses. And you know, I would contact a land specialist, and I would kind of interview this guy, you know, as to, and I'm not promoting us. I'm just saying wherever you are, find the guy. And because they have the ability and the contacts out there to you know, at any one time, any of our agents, for example, besides what's on the website, they have what. Yeah, they kind of refer to them as pocket listings. There's good old boys out there that have really good pieces of property, and they say, well, I don't want to put it on the website because then my neighbor will know, and the last thing I want to do is sell it to him because I've hated him for the last 20 years. You know, all kinds of craziness comes out, you know. So the guys will have pocket listings, and you may call one of our agents that specializes in land in that particular area, and he'll know what we have listed. He'll know what every other agent has listed out there. We could work out of everybody's inventory. That's what's so cool. And for one person to go through every single website, and even if he does, he won't know every single property that's coming up very soon on the website, and then he won't have any idea what the pocket listings are, those guys that are out there, and sometimes those are the best properties. But contact this guy and kind of interview him, you know, pick his brain as to see what he actually knows. The cool thing about the land business, it's not like if you go into a car lot, for example, and you want to buy an automobile, the guy that walks up to you or the gal that walks up to you and introduces themselves, you're kind of obligated to them. You know, you're kind of stuck with that person, whoever walks up to you. But in the real estate business, you could pick your agent first and then go find your land. It doesn't matter what brokerage has that piece of land. That guy can help you find it, you know. And I used Florida, for example. Say it's out of state that you're looking for a piece of ground. We'll just say that. And you contact somebody in the state that you want a tract of land, or in the county where you want a tract of land. You know, that's your dream place. And then you tell them what you want. You give them all the criteria. And this guy now, while you're at work in Florida doing whatever it is that you do, he's working for you. He's trying to find you that ideal. He knows what your budget is. He knows what's important to you. He knows all the information, and then more importantly, he knows all the tracts of land just about that are available or coming up for sale soon. And that's where I would start.
Is there anything you should be thinking about when it comes to, you know, do you recommend that people should absolutely 100% go to this area, even if it's you mentioned out of state or counties? Do you think you can do this kind of research digitally enough to make a decent decision, or should you be going to each one of these different properties you're considering, walk them before making any kind of even preliminary decision?
Oh, absolutely. Once you narrow down a kind of area, okay, and and you identify, or someone identifies for you some tracts of land, I want to look at as many as possible. it's kind of weird because I've looked at property. I've run the numbers. I've looked at the aerials. I've done all the things normal people do. But then one of my rituals is if I've narrowed it down to one or two properties, I want to be left alone, and I want to walk that property several times alone, and then I want to sit out there and I want to feel that property. And that's what sounds weird, but it's just like I'm really passionate about land in every aspect. I mean, the smell of the dirt, just the texture of the trees, everything. I'm really into land, and I like to sit out there and hang out there because I've had good feelings. Believe it or not, I've had good feelings about a property, and I've had bad feelings about a property. Just I don't know how to explain it. Just a gut that I have about the way it feels to me just doesn't feel right, and I have not. I don't care what the price is or anything. I just don't. I'm not interested. So that's just my ritual. But yes, look at as many properties as you can. When I was selling land here and I was out every day, what I try to do, say you call me and you say, hey, I noticed this property on your website, and I'd like to come up this weekend and look at it. So what I do in the meanwhile, after we talk for a little while and I identify everything what you like, what you don't like, what the budget is, all that information, then what I do is I find as many properties that fit that bill as well. And then I call you back and I say, hey, listen, I've also done this. I've done research and I have several other properties that I'd like to show you when you're up here as well, so that you could really make a good decision. And if you don't make any decision, at least you'll learn more about what you're looking for. You have a better understanding of what there is out there. And so when they come and I pick them up and we go look at land, this is normally my game plan. If I've got a lot of properties, what I tell them is this: let's go to these properties first. I want to drive you all over the property, and give you all the information. You'll be looking at aerials while we're driving. We'll be talking and everything, and we'll look at this many properties before lunch, and then we'll look at this many after lunch, and then somewhere around 2 or 3 o'clock, we're gonna talk about which ones you're ready to eliminate. And it's amazing because they're by that time they say, okay, this one doesn't feel as good because of this. This one I don't like because of this. And now we're down to 2 properties, typical scenario. And so now we go back to those properties and we grid them. I mean, we get out, we walk, we look at everything, and that's how I like to do it. I like a person to cover a lot of ground and have a really good understanding. I don't like it, believe it or not. And it's not, for us, it's not about the sale. It's about the experience. We want that person to have a great experience, and we want to build a trust. We're very passionate about hunting. We're very passionate about land, and we're very passionate about people that buy land. And so we want it to be a really good experience, and we don't want to leave any rock unturned. So very seldom do we even say, they could say, okay, and this goes against every rule that you've ever heard concerning sales, but they may say, okay, this is exactly what I want. Let's go write it up. And at the chance of losing that sale, our guys will even say, you know what? That's great. And we could do this. We could write an offer on it, subject to looking at 3 other properties or whatever. But I want you to look. I don't want you to lose this opportunity, and we could pin it down if that's the case. But I want you to look at more, because you don't buy a piece of property every day, and that's how we approach it.
I have a quick question in regards to purchasing property, and nothing against a real estate agent or a land specialist, but do you need a real estate agent or a land specialist to purchase land?
No, you don't if you have a lot of time. If you have a lot of time and you have a fair amount of knowledge of what you want, what fits, and everything. No, you just do your research, and especially, here's the deal: we're if you're in your hometown, you're in your area on your turf, you know the area well, and a property comes up for sale, especially. I mean, you don't need a real estate agent at all. When you need a real estate agent is when you have a particular property in mind, and you have been looking. Here's two scenarios. One, you have been looking on your own. You haven't been able to find it, and you have nobody working for you when you're working, and so that's when you need an agent. But if you've got a really good handle on what's going on in your area, and you've got time, you don't need a real estate agent necessarily. And if you're out of town, like if you're from out of town, and you're interested in a property in another state, I would right away get a real estate agent. I mean, in my mind, without a question, I'd have a real estate agent, and for a couple reasons. Is they don't cost you anything. That seller is paying a commission regardless whether you have a real estate agent or not. And a lot of times that real estate agent, because of their experience of negotiating these deals, because they do it every day, can actually save you more money than you may have been able to buy without them. I'm not saying you necessarily, but I'm saying the average person. They would be able to save them that money. So here's a guy that's not costing you anything. You're not paying his commission, and he does this every single day. Where you think about what you do, or whatever anyone does. I mean, I could get on Google, and I swear that if I watch, not Google but YouTube, if I watch a doctor, man, you can see anything nowadays on YouTube, do a brain surgery. I promise you, I feel like I could do it. I saw where he made that incision and everything that he did, and but the reality is, I'm not going to be anywhere near as proficient as that guy, because that's what he does. He's a brain surgeon. He does that, every day, and this is what these guys do, and no matter how perfunctory, how elementary it seems on YouTube, I know I can't do it as well as they do. Although a lot of times I convince myself I can, but don't let me cut anywhere near your head with a scalpel.
We'll keep the scalpel far away. So what should somebody be looking for actually in a piece of property? Let's go back to that hypothetical situation where this is someone who's looking for a starter property that is great for hunting, but also might be a good investment too. What specific types of features in a property or layout of a property or maybe location would be good for that type of situation? You've mentioned a handful of different things throughout our conversation, but I kind of want to talk about it here in one place. What's the ideal property to look for in this type of situation?
Right. It's an interesting question. Okay, first and foremost, in an area or a region that if what you're looking for is a property that has an area that has produced big bucks, because, I mean, the reason for your purchase is for hunting. And if it's just for deer, and I'd say just for deer, I don't play that down at all. There's more people out there that are just interested in a piece of ground that they could hunt and have deer on the property and turkey on the property. I keep saying big deer. And that's me because I'm obsessed with it. But the average person, at the end of the day, when we ask them what they're looking for and what's important to them, it's amazing, man. There's so many people just want deer to hunt on their property, and they have in their mind, I would like to at some point build a cabin on this property, and I would like to have a pond that I could see from the cabin, and I would like to come up here with my family and enjoy it. Come out here on weekends and hang out and come up with the guys in the hunting season, and those are the things. Everybody, I approach this cautiously, because everybody has a different dream. You know what I'm saying? What is a dream to me on a property is totally different than most people. But let's say for a minute that it has to do with deer. Well, I would research the areas that have produced the most deer, or the areas that produce the biggest deer, depending on what I'm after. When every year they're killing big animals in a certain area, well, there's a few things that come into play. There's a very good chance that many of the landowners are also very good land stewards in managing the wildlife. That's a really big deal. We have clients come in from different states that their biggest concern is trespassers or bad neighbors, because they've had that experience in the state where they came from. You know, so I'm interested in. I'm going to tell you what I'm interested in first is an area that has a good history of producing quality animals. That's number one. Now, as far as the habitat, to be totally honest with you, I don't care that much, depending on how much time I have to improve that property, what I want to do with that property, because the things that property doesn't have also affects what the value of that property is. So if I could purchase a property in a good area and purchase it for a low enough price, I don't mind. Like, for example, I think water is very important, but I will budget to put water in the property. I'll put a couple ponds, small ponds on that property. And as far as habitat, if it has very poor habitat, as I mentioned earlier, that I would create successional plants. Some of the highest protein on a farm sometimes is not what you have in the food plot, but it's what's growing wild throughout the property. There's a lot of forbs, literally weeds, that produce a ton of protein and are highly attractive to the deer, very digestible, unbelievable. There's Craig Harper. He's a wildlife biologist.
Yeah.
He just came out with a book. You know who Craig Harper is?
Yep.
He just came out with a book, and it's called A Guide to Wildlife Food Plots and Early Successional Plants. And it is the most complete book on everything that you need to know about improving the habitat that's ever been written. It's neat because it's got a picture of every weed that you may have in the past tried to get off your property, that is high in protein and as far as holding. I mean, before you could grow deer on your property, and before you could even hunt deer on your property, you've got to hold those deer on your property, and all these different forbs that are edible do just that. They provide great bedding because they provide really good cover, and they're also high in protein, very 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 digestible, very consumable weeds. But anyhow, that's you could take a piece of ground that has very little to nothing to offer and turn it into just a paradise for holding and growing deer. Even if it doesn't. To me, the most important thing is that it's in an area that has produced quality animals. Now, before the other consideration, I'll back up. The other consideration is you could go to a piece of property and take soil samples and determine if it's not a piece of property, a tract of land that already has a portion of it that's tillable. You could determine if that property, what's laying underneath that thatch, is good tillable dirt or not. I mean, I know people that have, they've purchased pieces of ground that look just like a brushy track of nothing, and it turned out to be some of the best soils that you could have, and instantly the value went crazy when they tore it all up and dissed it up fertilized it and planted it. But if you wanted the ideal situation, okay, you want the ideal situation. You don't want to start from scratch. Number one, a really good neighborhood, quality animals in the neighborhood, and number two, a mix of tillable and brush or timber that will provide you a revenue stream and provide edge and provide good soil for every plant that grows out of a good soil produces body mass, and good antlers. You know, all that ties in together. You know, so neat about Earth. I mean, just the ground that's beneath our feet, and it's not only the foundation that we walk on; it's the foundation that everything comes from. You know, I mean, everything that at some point, whatever we eat comes from the ground. You know, whatever we do, I mean, it's all from the ground. But anyhow, that's kind of the mix. And the things that it doesn't have, you know, what I like sometimes about kind of starting from scratch, not completely from scratch, but I like putting the water where it makes the most sense, wind-wise, the food plots where they make the most sense access-wise and wind-wise. I like to build my own, hinge cut my own bedding areas, again, where they make the most sense. See, if everything's already in place, sometimes you have to live with what's there, but if you can make these changes to the ground and turn it into, not only do you have food plots and not only do you have bedding areas and not only do you have water, but you have those different elements where they're the most productive in your hunting. How you can get in and get out, and you know, all those things. So I don't mind doing that stuff. If it has it all in the perfect place, that's great. But
that
I
always,
think the main.
I was gonna say that has always been what has gotten me the most excited about buying a piece of ground, is that ability to manufacture kind of how you want all these different pieces to fit together in a really thoughtful, strategic way. That is great for your hunting, and then number two, I think it's just a lot of fun.
It is.
So let's say I found this perfect piece of property for me. Maybe I'm in Ohio and I've got this nice little 40 or 50 acre piece that I can afford reasonably. I've got a decent way to get some cash rent out of it. I've got some layout possibilities. I'm liking all these things. A realtor helped me find it. What do I need to know about the process that happens next? I've decided to sign on the dotted line. What do I need to know that maybe the average guy or girl might not know about what actually happens between saying yes and actually taking possession of that property?
Well, yeah, I guess if you've signed on the dotted line, I would hope that before you signed on that dotted line, you have spoken to a banker, a lender, and and you have checked out what that payment would be. You know, I mean, that it fits your budget, your finances. You know, you've got all that in line, and so. And it depends. If you're working with a realtor, he will. In most cases, I won't say he will. So in our case, what we do is you have your copy of the contract. Say we're to the step to where the seller has accepted your offer, and now we're going forward. Where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. Well, where we go from here is we determine where we want to close the transaction, and a lot of states that's up to the lender, or rather that's up to the seller where he wants to close. In some states, you know, it's a mutual, wherever it could be either or. But so we know the title company where we're going to close it, or we know the attorney that's going to close it. So that attorney or that title company, he gets a copy of the contract. Now we go to the lender. Of course, the lender gets a copy of the contract, and the buyer would discuss the terms with the lender. So the lender's doing his part, and so now the real estate agent who is working with the lender, he's working with the title company, will probably make the lender will probably make the arrangements for an appraiser. So now the appraiser is involved. So you've got an appraiser involved, you have a lender involved, and you have a title company or an attorney involved in closing the transaction. Now, there may be a case where the seller has an attorney, and the buyer also has an attorney to look over all the paperwork. Now, as the agent, I want to make sure that both those attorneys have a copy of the contract as well, and all of them involved in this process, all the parties involved in this process also have each other's contact information, because there's times when of course, the title company needs to talk to the lender and know specifically who the loan officer is, and the seller and the buyer may want to know who the appraiser is to expect them on the property, and all. So everybody knows everybody that's involved in the whole process. So we on the contract itself, one of the terms of the offer is the closing date. So let's say the closing date is 30 days, and as the agent, my job is to keep everyone that's in the transaction abreast of what's going on all the time, especially the seller and the buyer. And as the agent, I would be in contact with them, telling them, okay, the title work is done, everything's on schedule. The appraiser will have the appraisal done by Thursday, have that information to the bank, and all these things are in motion, and they all have to happen by that closing date, because if everything doesn't happen by the closing date, and that date of closing was a condition of the sale, which it is once it's on the contract, that contract can be terminated. So you never want that to happen. So you have to keep all that in motion. I don't know, when you asked me that question, if that was what you were after, but those are the elements that happen after you say okay and everything. And then of course the day of the closing happens, and then when everyone signs on the line there, they sign the settlement sheet, and they sign all the papers that have to do with the transfer of ownership. Everything's done there, and as of that day, it's your property. You and the bank.
And that is a beautiful day, I would imagine.
Oh man,
that's a day I've dreamed about for sure. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like I've followed this process of everything I need to do, from determining whether I can do it, to now finding how do I find a property, to picking the right property, to knowing what actually happens once I decide on that property. I'm feeling like I'm ready to go buy a farm now, so my wife probably won't be real happy with you, Dan. But
Oh no,
I'm getting a divorce.
She'll be very happy. No, I don't think so. I think she'll be very happy. I think I tell you what. I'll mention this is get your wives involved in the process, because I remember we were just married. That I'd say, actually I was more like 20. We got married very young, and I think that first piece of that tract of land that was 5 acres, I was so excited, and it's contagious, and she was excited about it, because that's to me, that's the beginning of wealth. Land that's where it's at. And what we would go out there on weekends, and we'd have picnics on that property. We'd hang out on that property. It was 5 acres, and it was like, we really, really enjoyed it, And I think it's a good thing. A lot of times, wives, they don't get involved in the process of the land purchase unless maybe there's a house or a lodge or a chalet or something on the property. Then they're really involved. But it really is a good thing, because what that property might represent when you purchase it, as far as that you're spending money, actually turns out to be one of the best investments as a couple that you'll ever make in your life.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
That makes sense. So I have one final question for you, Dan. But before I get to that, Dallas, do you have a final question you want to throw out there?
Maybe just one. What are some common mistakes or in a process that a potential buyer or maybe even seller makes when, buying or selling a piece of property?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the biggest mistakes that a seller can ever make when selling a piece of property is not disclosing something that is a defect of the property. Maybe there's an oil tank under the ground or something, and he doesn't disclose it because he doesn't want to pay to have it removed, and he doesn't want that to scare somebody that's interested in the property. If there is anything that's a potential hidden defect, it has to be disclosed. That's the biggest mistake a seller could make. Another mistake a seller could make is not disclosing that there is someone else that has ownership of that property with them. Like sometimes a couple people go in and buy a property, and the seller thinks, one of them thinks, well, I'm gonna get this thing on the market, and I think once I get a buyer, I'll be able to talk my partner into selling it. That turns legal and ugly very fast when the partner doesn't want to sell it, and you've got an offer for the full price. That's something that as a seller you just can't play games with stuff like that. You have to be honest. Everything has to be open, honest, and transparent. As a buyer, I think the most important thing as a buyer is don't settle. Make sure that is the property that you want to purchase, and when it is, you'll know it. You definitely will know it. It's I could say that, and I don't even know that I could quantify it. I don't even know if I could explain it, but you'll know it is. With me, I run a lot of numbers, and I run numbers to. I've had properties that I wanted, and the numbers just don't make sense. I got to get that cash rent up, and the next thing that I do now, I don't even own the property, but I'm discussing with farmers giving me a bid on that tract, and I have a permission from the landowner to allow them to come onto the property before I even own it, and they're getting bids on it. I've run numbers where I've had the timber crews, and I've made that part of the equation. So a lot of times you think, man, it doesn't work. It doesn't math out for me. I won't be able to afford it. Don't give up so quick. Pull that calculator out and get a little resourceful, because I've had situations where I thought I couldn't afford it. Not only was I able to afford it, but it made me money right off the bat. I was making money. It's amazing. See, to me, the purchase of land, yes, you're going to enjoy it. Yes, it's going to be what you always wanted. All those things are great, but it will. To me, it's like a business. It's like when you purchase that piece of land and you're smart about it, that piece of land is one of the best investments, not only when you sell it, but immediately when you bought it that you've ever made. So that's something that now my first piece of ground, was I that smart? No. My second piece of ground, no. But you learn, and there wasn't someone like me to help other people that had not walked down that road before. When I bought land, there weren't land specialists. There were no people that could tell you, my first few tracts of land, how it could make financial sense. So those are things that are very important to me. When you ask, a lot of times you'll ask open-ended, what should a buyer? Well, all I could relate to is me as a buyer. You know what I mean? There's because we're all so different the way that we approach things and what's important to us. But what's really important to me, number one, is that it's a good investment, and that it is the farm that I want. Now, if it was the farm that I really wanted, and I'm pretty prudent, if it doesn't make financial sense, I won't buy it. It's got to make financial sense. Just the fact that it has big bucks is not enough for me. Now, if the next guy might have money to burn, and that might make a big difference. You know, it doesn't matter, but it does to me. So that those are the things that I would look at as a buyer or a seller.
I tell you what, there's definitely a lot you shared there that is intriguing. That definitely makes us intriguing. I think really how you framed it as a business decision. I think I've always felt guilty wanting to buy something like this because it'd be something I would just enjoy. But I think there is a lot of. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it from a number standpoint. If you can find a way to make this a positive investment in the long run, and you get to also have some fun with it too, that certainly is appealing. So here's my last question for you, Dan. Do you remember the first deer you killed on a property you owned? And if so, can you tell us about that moment?
Yeah, I tell you what led up to it. You know, it's kind of weird that you asked me that, because I don't think you ever forget that. I remember I'd hunted it, this tract of land I bought, and I remember about the second time I hunted it. It was early in the morning, and the sun was coming up, and that soft orange sun, that golden sun just shines through the woods, and you got those shadows that just lay for long lengths through the timber, and it was just like the leaves were kind of took on a shade of orange from the sunlight, and about how the woods wake up in the morning, the birds start to sing and everything. And I'm up there, I'm about 18 feet in the tree, and it was crisp. It was a cool morning, maybe 8 miles an hour the wind. It was really that perfect morning. And I remember I'm looking down this creek and across the land, and now all this beautiful stuff is going on, and it's like, holy cow, I own this. You know what I mean? It was like, golly, I had one of those moments where this is mine. And what went through my mind is all the people to that point in my life that I'd introduced myself, and I knocked on their doors, and they said, no, I've got somebody that hunts this land. I wouldn't be interested in leasing it, or even before that. No, I don't allow hunters on my property. Just all the years of just struggling to just find a place to hunt. Now here I am sitting in a tree, and this is all mine. That is a crazy. I mean, it's a feeling that I can't even describe. And then the first buck that I had shot, was by no means a monster. But it was a solid, I think that animal was a solid 140-inch buck. And I remember I shot him. I arrowed him. I could tell you every step he took. I could tell you everything that he rubbed, everything that he smelled, everything that was going on that morning. But I'll tell you this: it almost like when I turned loose that arrow and it went through him and he spun. It was so fast and he ran, and I looked back at the ground, and there was the arrow, and yep, I hit him. I could see clearly that I hit him good. And he ran out there, and he ran through the timber to the edge of the field, and he stopped. And now I'm talking about seconds, probably between the time that I shot him, and he ran through the timber and came out the other end and stopped. was probably a total of 5 seconds. You know how they go? It's just like it's just like bam, run, and it's like 5 seconds. But it was like slow motion. It was surreal, and he stood there and he stumbled to his right, and then he regained his footing, and then stumbled to the left, regained his footing, and then fell. And that whole thing must have lasted 7 seconds. It was a double lung. He ran out there, stopped on the edge of the field, and was running out of oxygen to the brain and collapsed. And so, but I could see it vividly, and it's been a lot of years ago. I see it crystal clear vividly. And in fact, I'll tell you this: I could go to Kansas. I go to Kansas, or I could go to Missouri. I could go. My farm. I have a farm in Missouri, and I have a farm in Illinois. But I could go anywhere other than my own personal farm, and I could kill an animal that's 20 times larger than the one that I killed on my farm. But there's nothing more rewarding than the animal that you harvested on the farm that grew that animal, and all the work that you put into that farm to be in that position when you harvest that animal. Because I tell you, and the other thing that happens is I didn't mention, and I enjoy the heck out of everything we've talked about as far as developing a farm. But what I didn't mention is how you have a relationship with each animal. If you start journaling every one of these bucks, every shed that you find, and you date them and you label them and you try to match them up and you study these animals on your property, then when that animal is 4 years old, you're saying, man, he's pretty cool. And then when you kill him and he's 6 years old, it's like, holy cow! It's a totally different experience. You know, So that not only do I remember that first animal and that first moment and how I felt, but I have a relationship almost with every animal. There are animals, obviously, especially during the rut, that come in and go out, and I may never see them again. But there is a family herd that I know intimately, and of course, my job is that they don't know me intimately. However, obviously, a lot of them do. You know, it's a pretty amazing process.
That is awesome. I've been blessed to experience something similar to that, but on property I only have permission on or lease. But I definitely dream of one day being able to go through that whole process on a piece of ground that I've owned and managed and hunted. It sounds like an incredible thing to be able to do, and I think both myself and Dallas and many of our listeners, I think, are hoping to do the same someday, and this has certainly helped us, I think, along that process and helped us get started. So Dan, thank you so much for sharing your huge amount of experience with this. It's been very helpful, and for anyone that wants to learn more about whitetail properties, where should they go online?
Yeah, it's simply that, whitetailproperties.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, we will link to that. And as we mentioned before you got on the line with us, Dan, me and Dallas both spend a lot of time on your website just dreaming and looking at those properties and wondering maybe someday. So I'm sure we'll be doing that again soon, and we'll be checking out that website and link. So Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys. Very awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you and your audience. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, good luck this next hunting season.
You too, man. Just every day I feel very blessed and very fortunate just being on this side of the ground. But I appreciate the good luck on the hunting. Thank you. You too.
Thanks a lot. Have a great evening.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And with that, we are going to call this a wrap. But before we let you go, a quick heads up. We've recently launched a new video series over on Wired to Hunt and the Wired to Hunt YouTube channel, in which I'm releasing a new short weekly video on all sorts of different hunting related topics and in a lot of different unique formats. So I think you'll really get a kick out of it. So be sure to head over to the Wired to Hunt YouTube channel at youtube.com/wired to hunt. check out the videos there and subscribe to that channel so you'll be able to see all the new episodes in the coming weeks. And speaking of subscribing, if you've not yet subscribed to this podcast, make sure you do that too on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. So finally, we need to give a big thank you to our partners who help make this podcast possible. So big thanks to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Maven Optics, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. And finally, most importantly, thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this one. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.